In this video and in the next 4 or 5 videos in the series, we're going to be covering the absolute most important topic that you can learn about in Blender, object structure. Gaining a mastery over these concepts will really make the difference between having a goal in Blender, whether it's creative, engineering, or what have you, and seeing that goal manifest into reality versus your ideas just fading off into the mist. So as far as Blender is concerned, an object is basically anything you can add in the 3D view. So if I were to right click and drag the 3D cursor over here and press Shift A to bring up our add menu, well, under the mesh category, we have all these different mesh type objects we can add. We've added a lot of these: monkeys, torus shapes, cubes, etc. Under this more category, we have surface objects, metaball objects, and some other different object types. And then so we have curve, text, camera, lamps, and so on. So basically anything we can add. So in one level, Blender is regarding all of these as the class object. Okay, so to Blender, there's at least one similar thing about all these things. They are an object. So for instance, if under surface here, I were to add a NURBS cylinder here, we can see down the outliner that we have this surface object. But if I click this little plus sign, this displays what this object is really composed of with this little icon. And this icon, of course, means that this is a surface object. Typically, if you press tab to go into edit mode, the thing that you're editing, this is the thing that's actually inside of that object, also known as the data block. To Blender, we have a bunch of different things that could be considered objects. So I'll press tab to go back into object mode. So I could double right click here. And under more, let's go ahead and add a metaball. Let's double right click over here. We could add say a point lamp there. Now you can see that we have all these different objects here. Of course, we can rename each one of these objects. So I could double click that point lamp and I could call it my super cool lamp or anything. But when I click the plus sign to reveal the data block, that is kind of the core of the object, the thing that lives inside, the thing that you're really editing and using. We see that it has the name of point, but I could actually also rename this to something else too. I could call this the data block that lives in this object, and then click. The data block, that is the actual kind of core thing that the thing is. To not sound too convoluted there, you can actually rename that as well. So if I were to click on this cube object, these icons are letting us know what data blocks these objects are actually composed of. So for instance, under the cube, that's letting us know that the mesh data block that lives inside this object is a mesh type. So this is going to be the same for any type of mesh object we add. So if I were to double right click here, under mesh, add a plane, we see here that this has the same icon next to it as the cube does because the plane's data block is this mesh plane here. And then so if I were to double right click over here and add a torus shape, we're going to basically see the same thing. Whereas for the lamp, we see it containing a lamp type data block. So I'm going to go ahead and click on the top line of this outliner here, and we can actually click this and drag this up. That's part of why Sensei format is designed this way, so we can click and drag this outliner up when we need to stretch it out. So I just changed the name of the data block of this lamp object here, this point lamp that we made. But do we really need to change the name of the actual data block, the thing actually sort of the sole core thing of the object? Do we really need to change the name of that? No. Really, you're only going to need to worry about the object itself and maybe changing the name of the object itself to something useful, depending on what you're doing. So you may be thinking, when I added this torus here, if we click the little plus sign on the torus here, why not just call this object torus and let the data block be the object? Why these, two steps here? So there's a bunch of different reasons that you might want this, but I'll give you 2 reasons right now. The first reason is part of being good at things and planning ahead for things to evolve and develop is creating structures, hierarchies that allow you to control things really efficiently. So there's that reason. And then the second reason is if 2 objects are of the same type, you can actually switch these data blocks out. So we have this torus object here, and then we have this cube object here. Both of them are mesh types, and so long as they're the same type, and we can always know they're the same type by the little icon next to them, we can actually switch their data blocks out. So over here in the properties panel, we have two icons, one which gives us information about the actual object and stuff we can do to that object, which is this icon here. And then this other icon here, which will change depending on what type of object you have selected, which is the data block, or as we talked about, the core of that object. So I've got this torus selected here. If I were to click on the data block icon, which this changes depending on what type of object you have selected. So for instance, if we selected this metaball object, which is called mball here in our outliner, notice that the icon changes. And so if we click on the lamp, it changes there. We could actually switch out this cube data block for this torus data block of the objects. So say I wasn't dealing with these simple shapes, but actually really, complex characters or objects or something that I had been modeling or sculpting, and I wanted to switch them out. Under the data block icon, here is where we can select from the mesh data blocks that exist in the scene. So I could just select torus here, and now this cube is its data block, the core thing inside of it is now this torus shape. Likewise, I could click on this torus object here and switch this out to the cube. So that's another reason for having things structured this way. So while we're on the topic, this would be a good time to explain what this panel over here is. So I'm going to click the top of this outliner and just drag it down back here. I mentioned that this icon is the data block icon of the object. So depending on what type of object we have selected, such as a lamp, we're going to have access to the kind of core parameters of that object. Here are our lamp options. If we click on this metaball, here are the metaball options to change this particular metaball object we add, and mesh and so on. So it is extremely common to need to access these parameters of the data block, or basically in layman's terms, change stuff going on with the object. That's why this panel over here is devoted specifically to the data block. And so with this open, no matter what panel we have open over here, say the world tab or the render tab, whatever we're working on, whenever we click on an object, we have immediate access to the parameters of that object. So if I were to double right click here and say add a text object, we immediately have access to change the parameters of that object. So what this actually is over here, this panel, this is just a properties panel. So we mentioned before that whenever you see a little plus tab in Blender, it means a menu is hiding. If we were to click this little plus tab at the top, we see that the data block icon is pushed down here on this properties panel. Now we do have the header actually at the top of this panel, but I could switch this around and it would look just like that one. So I could right click on here and click flip to bottom, and then it would be on the bottom there. However, we want to keep this menu devoted strictly to being able to immediately access the different type of properties that are displayed when we click on different object types. And so that's why that's there. In addition to being kind of background space for when you need to very quickly increase the size of the outliner, which gives you immediate access to the object structure and grouping and things like that in your scene. And we'll get more into that when we talk about grouping, parenting, and the outliner and so on. But it's just a really nice way to have quick access to expanding your outliner, in addition to giving you immediate access to the properties of each one of these objects. So you may be thinking, well, yeah, it's nice to have immediate access to those object properties every time you click on something, but now there's significantly less screen real estate. And that's why when we press T, this brings up our tool shelf and property shelf, and we keep the zero brush menu open so we can immediately click on the full screen button here and always, have very quick access to working in the full screen mode in Blender when we are not dealing with all these other parameters of our scene. We definitely got pretty technical in this video. I mentioned how the stuff in this video and the next few videos is really important to understand. It's not super important that you grasped everything in this particular video perfectly. I just really wanted to give a good foundation and setup for the concepts we'll be talking about in the next few videos. If some of that flew over your head, feel free to ask a question in the comments below, or over at blendersensei.com. Don't worry about it too awfully much. I just wanted to give a basic introduction to object structure in Blender.